Was there any other times that you can think about where you kind of changed somebody's mindset about Black people?
Mm-mm.
No? What do you think white people should know?
Well, what I think that white people should know about being Black is that sometimes it's very scary. You get excluded just because of your skin color. And it's just not right.
Race is a very, very, very touchy subject. It's a very hard conversation to have because it takes one to look inside at oneself. That is hard to do, you know, especially when you're saying something about a particular group of people. You know, you have to think about your own experiences. You have to think about the experiences of your friends or your family. You know, and when someone calls someone a racist or indicts racism, usually on a broad spectrum, everyone can identify with someone that's like that. But what it does is it makes you question your integrity about yourself. Because if I hang around with a bank robber and I know he's a bank robber, what is that saying about me?
And when we talk about racism, that's really the crux of it, is that people aren't willing to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. So they project onto them their experience of the world and say, why can't you see things my way? Why would you be upset? Why would you run from the police? Because they can't imagine somebody else's experience would inform them to say, when I see police, I gotta run. And that's, you know, what we refer to in graduate school as colonization. You're essentially colonizing somebody else's experience and saying, if they're not living or viewing the world in the way that I do, there's something wrong with them. Instead of saying, you know, everybody experiences things differently and they should be able to own their experience, and I should be willing to be open to understanding their experience. And I think that's where the biggest division comes when we talk about race, because folks just aren't willing, particularly white folks, are just not willing to put themselves in a different position, say, how could this person ultimately make that decision? What could they have experienced in their life that this is the way they view the world? When if you're African American or Black or a minority, the reality is we're constantly putting ourselves in other people's positions.
You know, but you don't have to accept racism, though. You know, racism is changed over time. Like you have dialogue with somebody, you build a relationship, you learn who this person is, and you grow. Some families learn racism the hard way. You know, when they daughter bring this Black guy home and then she bring home a mixed baby. Been racist all my life. Well, you know what? I really love little Jimmy. So Black people aren't that bad after all. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to have to learn like that. That's kind of crazy.
I don't believe people that I don't believe that Black people, Hispanics, and Mexicans can be racist. I think that it's a reaction to racism. I think that if I say, oh no, I'm not going there, it's a whole bunch of white people there, I'm there. It's me basically saying how I'm gonna go to this function with all these white people and how I'm gonna be looked at. It's not me saying, oh, I'm not going there because I don't like white people or I'm gonna treat these white people a certain way. It's me saying that I know I don't wanna be in this environment because I know they're gonna perceive me a certain way and they're gonna act or even be overly nice to me. I've had people be racist, saying nice stuff to me and not knowing that they were being that way. They thought that they were really they were really acknowledging my situation of me being a Black person.
If we can get the message out to anybody, man, these parents and us adults, man, we gotta get into these kids' lives. Like, it's 2018, we need to bring back the community centers and like whites, Blacks, everybody need to come together. It's a sad tragedy.
Why do you think it is that you don't see that racism impacting you? What do you think is the difference?
Well, I think one, growing up in North Chicago, Illinois, where the Great Lakes Naval Base is located, I was surrounded with diversity, okay? Guamanian, Philippine, Black, white, Hispanic. I mean, North Chicago had it all, okay? And so I grew up around diversity. And I'm one of those first hip hop generations, and so that alone brought a lot of people of different cultures together, under that one banner of hip hop. And so my mother, I grew up with my mother, And my father wasn't much in my life. I knew my father. He popped in and out, loved him to death. He passed. But my mother was, she was a teacher in our community. She was an altar person in our community. She went and got her master's degree in my community. So education was expected. A high school degree and go to college was an expectation. It wasn't like, rah, rah, you get my, if I came home with an A, my mother was like, okay, what you want, And so I was raised with high expectations, okay? So when I came to Racine in '98, I brought those high level expectations. My mother did not allow me to use anything. And she made sure that I had I understood who I was as a black male.
When you say that, what do you mean?
She wanted to make sure that I, at some point there was, in the 80s, we had Public Enemy and Fight the Power. And so we went through and then we went to gangster rap. And so a lot of times we started bouncing around in terms of who we were, okay? But my mother wanted to make sure that she understood that was entertainment. She talked about that to me. And she just wanted to make sure that I understood who I was as a young black man.
With things being focused the way they are and how one makes a living in this world. And how I mean that is that we're talking industrial conversation versus a technological conversation. We're talking about people and how one is being taught to make a living is completely different now than it was 20, 30 years ago. And there are these gaps in technical proficiency. There are these gaps in the way school teaches people to think entrepreneurship, to think about technology and reaching for those kinds of opportunities. Difference in that department, absolutely. I hear a lot of my non-minority friends having conversations around that, being steered in that direction, being led in that direction. Companies, people, teachers, pulling them in that direction. I don't hear that from my black friends. I don't hear that from my brown friends, that they're being pulled in that direction. I hear teachers telling them that blacks and brown people, the numbers are in the disparate category in math and science, in the STEM category especially. And I'm square, so I know a bit about STEM, and I also push that. But knowing that there's some racial disparities in those numbers, I talk that up as much as possible to my peers. It's not something that they say those who are in a position to steer them academically are talking up. Not nearly as much as they should. I don't know if teachers, and I've talked to some, but I don't know if some teachers think that's the parents' job, or that's somebody other than their job to talk that up to students. But I mean, we're in this cultural fight for black and brown people, especially the numbers and what they look like in Racine. It's everybody's job to be talking about racial equity and social inclusion of all groups. That's not one group's job, that's everybody's job.
I want to see, number one, I'm not naive enough to think that racism will ever disappear out of this country. The country was built on racism. And the foundation, if you build a house and you got a rotten foundation, then it'll collapse soon or...
Pretty cynical view of things.
But that's the way it is. If you read the history, that's it. What I want to see is equality, but I can't change the system because I'm a minority in numbers. I'm not talking about the color. I mean, I can't change it. Only you can change it.